I'm Bill Hemmer. This is Hemmer Time. It's a murder mystery that has captured the country. Gabby Petito was a 22-year-old woman from New York State. She was found dead in Wyoming almost 2 weeks ago. Her boyfriend and one-time fiancé is Brian Laundrie. Laundrie drove from Wyoming to the state of Florida to be with his parents, and then he disappeared several days ago. Jeanine Pirro is my guest, host of Justice with Judge Jeanine on the Fox News Channel, and welcome. It's nice to see you.
Good to be here, Bill.
Now, you're a former state judge in New York, prosecutor as well, and you are looking for justice. What happened here?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious he killed her. And, people will say you can't say that until a jury says it, that there is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. But as an assistant DA and the elected DA for 3 terms, you don't bring people to trial because you think they're innocent. You bring people to trial because you think they're guilty. I believe that the evidence is very clear that not only is Brian Laundrie responsible for the death of Gabby Petito, but that he is responsible for delaying notification of her whereabouts and not cooperating. And the words of his attorney kind of ring in the back of my mind all the time. His attorney who says, the Laundrie family wants to be in the background. Well, that's such hogwash because the only people who know anything are the Laundrie family. Remember, Bill, she lived with Gabby lived with Brian and his family for a year before they went on this trip. So she was a member of their family as well. He comes back on September 1 with Gabby's van with no Gabby. No one says anything. He's mowing the lawn. He's riding his bicycle. His parents do something very unusual. They buy an embedded camper for their pickup truck, and within a few days, they take a camping trip with their 23-year-old son. That was an opportunity for them to either get rid of evidence or to assess a place where he might go or to get things that he might need to go away. The fact that they allege that he went hiking on September 14th, which they didn't tell us until September 17th, in the Carlton Reserve was just a distraction where the family tried to mislead police, law enforcement, and Gabby's family. Remember, Gabby has a mother and a father and a stepfather as well. That was intentional obstruction. How did they know if he really went hiking? How did they know when to go get his Mustang, where he would leave his Mustang, to bring the Mustang home, and then claim, oh, our son is missing? No, your son is not missing. Your son is on the lam. And all we know is that you are not speaking. You're traveling with him. You're buying an embedded camper, which is highly unusual when they were using her van to camp. And now we're left with this question of where she is. We know now she's in Wyoming, but how she died.
Yeah, and how she died. Let's discuss that now. Terrific setup, by the way. It has captured the imagination of millions of people because we want to try and figure this out. They have not released the cause of death.
Well, because...
Why not?
Well, first of all, understand there is the manner of death and there is the cause of death. The manner of death is something they say very early on. The manner can be an accident, suicide, natural, or homicide. Now, if they weren't sure that it was a homicide, they would say undetermined. They were clear from the first time they saw that body this was a homicide. That tells me that there is blunt force trauma, or that there is, and let me be clear, Bill, I started the first domestic violence unit in the nation in 1978. I know this issue like the back of my hand. I have fought as our culture and our society changed its views of battered women. All right? This kind of homicide is very personal. A strangulation is very common. A beating beyond recognition is very common. The emotion is very high. The reason we don't know the cause of death, which is the last thing that tells us what caused her death, is because they're doing toxicology reports. They're doing all kinds of scientific analysis in a lab that will tell them without a doubt that the cause of death was. They can look at her and say, it looks like a strangulation. She's got hyoid, the bone is fractured. She's got, petite hemorrhaging in her eyeballs. I mean, all that. But maybe it was an overdose. They've got to have all that stuff check before they come out and give a cause of death.
So I don't know what was happening inside of this home in Florida. But by the way I understand it, they were high school sweethearts.
Yep.
From Long Island, New York. His family moved to Florida first.
Right.
She then joined them a couple years later.
Yeah.
And they were engaged, I do believe, at some point, and perhaps during this trip to Wyoming. That's sort of the background of the two.
They were engaged, but what I find interesting, Bill, is that they said, well, marriage was kind of not really on the front burner, that they were just going to deal with that later. So it's almost like they pulled back from the engagement. And I thought that was very curious.
They're young.
They're too young.
Okay. He's 22 also, I believe.
He's 23.
Right? 23, okay. 23. And she is 22.
Yeah.
What is happening inside that home in Florida? There were 46 911 calls between September 10th, the day before Gabby went missing, and September 27th.
Well, what we do know, Bill, is that there were 2 calls on September 10th. That's the day before Gabby's mother reported her missing, by the father of Gabby, one around 4 o'clock and one about 6:30. That tells me that there's some tension now building between Gabby's father and the Laundries. That's the day before. So I'm assuming, and I have no basis for this, I'm assuming they're saying, where's Gabby? Tell us where Gabby is. I'm going to come there myself. Where is Gabby? So the police are called, but they're not giving us any further information. And for good reason. That's part of what is going on in terms of the creation of the criminal case. The next day, there are 3 911 calls by the mother, Gabby's mother. And then on the 14th, 15th, 16th, Gabby's mother has lost it now. She knows her daughter is missing. She's fighting with them. The father's fighting with them. Where's our Gabby? And they finally report her missing on September 11th. And at that point, you know that there's an internal fight between her parents and his parents.
Very interesting. So they've got the 911 calls,
yes,
and they can use that as evidence as well as they go through this.
And what's clear, what will be very interesting, Bill, is what the Laundries say. We don't know. Our son came without her. She decided to stay there. I mean, they could say a million things in response to the September 10th call by the father or the September 11th 911 call. There's a lot of information, which is why they're redacted and why we're not seeing them.
One thing that's a little bit unusual about this case is the amount of body cam video.
Yeah.
That took place in eastern Utah in the town of Moab back on the 12th of August. And I say a lot of video because there were 2 officers and then 2 park rangers, all 4 wearing body camera. Mm-hmm. And when they were called to the scene, I think that police stop may have lasted an hour and a half. And so you can watch all of this and you can see the questions, you can see the answer. And just this week, there was a new piece of video released, and on it, he says, I pushed her away. She got really worked up, and then she took a swing. She had her cell phone in her hand. I was just trying to push her away. She describes, eventually, as these officers seemingly pull out the information from her with repeated questioning, that he struck her in some way.
Yeah. Well, you know what's interesting as you go through the number of people who responded and the cameras, the body cams that these cops are wearing, which is always a great thing. I've always believed in them, is that things come out later. Initially, the police said, we had no idea that 911 caller called and said that there was a guy slapping a woman around. Okay. That's what the Moab police in Utah first said. And I said, baloney. There's no way the dispatcher sent them out out without telling them why she was sending them out, that strangers took it upon themselves to call 911. So they knew from the 911 that she had been slapped, according to the witnesses who don't get involved in these cases, Bill. I mean, I don't need to remind you of Kitty Genovese in Queens, where people pulled down their shades and turned up their radios as a man stabbed a woman to death, everyone thinking in the Kitty Genovese case it was a husband and wife fighting. Okay, people don't get involved in these cases. So we hear weeks later that, oh yeah, the dispatcher did tell them that there was an eyewitness who saw him hitting her. So now we've got more information coming out now where she says, yes, oh, he only held my face in his hand and he cut me with his nail and my face burns, the side of my face burns. But before she says that, looking at her face, the cop said, did something happen to your face, to your cheek? She still had a mark on her. And you know, if you've been punched or slapped, that burns.
For the full podcast, go to foxnewspodcast.com.